Conspiracy theories, a global phenomenon. Some people deny the existence of the new coronavirus, while believing that vaccination is about the implementation of brain chips. Others incite voters who just lost an election to assault democratic institutions, like those Trump supporters storming the US Capitol to stop Congress clear the way for a Joe Biden presidency.
Today's events did not happen spontaneously. The president who promoted conspiracy theories that motivated these thugs, the president who exhorted them to come to our nation's capital, egged them on, he hardly ever discourages violence and more often encourages it.
Are people who believe in conspiracy theories just gullible? Or is there more to it? And how worried should we be? Welcome to our COVID-19 special. I'm Monica Jones in Berlin, a city that's seen its fair share of protests by conspiracy theory followers. We even had a group storming the steps to the German parliament a few months ago. Not quite as dramatic as in Washington, but shocking enough. So who are these people and what drives them?
Some of them wear foil hats to protect themselves against radiation or ward off other evil spirits. Often considered harmless conspiracy theorists, they have now come to the notice of Germany's domestic intelligence agency, the Office for the Protection of the Constitution. The crisis around the coronavirus is a perfect fit. Some argue that it doesn't exist at all, others that it was invented by politicians to control us.
The spectrum ranges from mainstream society to people with esoteric views. There's nothing illegal about that, but they are now protesting alongside right-wing populists, right-wing extremists, who for their part are trying to exploit the dissatisfaction and hijack the demonstrations. That's the new thing about it and what we need to be worried about.
Right-wing extremists and conspiracy theorists point to perceived similarities with 1933, when Adolf Hitler seized power in Germany and the fascist dictatorship began. Some people demonstrating against the coronavirus measures have compared themselves to the Jewish victims of the Holocaust.
What we're seeing here is the trivialization and even denial of the Holocaust. Of course, that's absolutely unacceptable. It's not just anti-Semitic, it's a criminal offense.
One challenge facing investigators is the lack of organized structures among conspiracy theorists. There are branches of the American QAnon movement in Germany, but there's no reliable information about how many people belong to the hardcore of conspiracy theorists here. However, surveys suggest that 1 in 3 people believes that there is a grain of truth in their elaborate stories.
And for more, let's bring in Pierre Lamberti, a psychologist who's dedicated a lot of time on analysing the root causes and the nature of conspiracy theories. Good to have you with us. And of course, we have to start with what's happened in Washington. I mean, this people storming the Capitol there. Is this conspiracy theory at its worst?
Yeah, that's actually one of the consequences of conspiracy beliefs. We show that in our research that people who believe in conspiracies are not only more likely to use violent, but also more likely to use non-democratical approaches to fulfill their goals. So actually what experts were warning the whole time now happened. And I'm not completely surprised because Trump was trying to mobilize the people for years and, destabilizing democracy. It's actually just a result of these campaigns.
How worrying is this? Because obviously we've seen a lot of protest movements over here as well, anti-coronavirus measures protests. Those theories that are behind a lot of these protests, they're not new, but the followers of the theories are certainly more vocal and visible now, attracting a lot of media coverage. So how big a phenomenon is it?
I would say that before Corona, it was like 1/3 of the population in Germany who believed more or less in conspiracies. Like there are secret powers who are ruling everything, or that HIV was made up, this kind of stuff. Since the pandemic, you can assume that there's an increase, but we don't know that yet for sure because we have no comparison before and after the pandemic. But if you look at the social media channels, you see a huge increase on platforms like Telegram. You see that they are mobilizing more on the streets. So I don't know if they are more, but yeah, it's more relevant for them right now.
How dangerous is it to us as individuals? Because we look at it from the outside and say, what are these people doing? Why do they believe that? How susceptible are we when it comes to falling for conspiracy theories?
When you look at disinformation, wrong claims, we all believed in things that are not true. That happens easily. So I, for myself, believed for a long time that you eat 8 spiders in a lifetime. That's not true. That's fake news that some journalist made up years ago when the internet was newer. When it comes to conspiracies, I think also many people actually believe a little bit in them. And what we do in psychology is we measure the conspiracy mentality. That means the general tendency to believe in conspiracies or not. And most people are on the scale in the middle. That means they believe a little bit in it. And there are only a few who completely refuse that and don't have that mindset. And it's also the question if this is better, because people who have no conspiracy mindset are those who say, police, they are doing everything right. Whatever they do, I think they're amazing. And this is also not a critical perspective on society. So being in the middle is actually not the worst thing.
Is this actually a typical Western phenomenon that we're talking about, conspiracy theories?
No, conspiracy theories exist, or the belief in it exists all over the world. Psychologists, even think, at least some of them, that it has an evolutionary basis, so that it's rooted in our systems. There's one bigger study that was conducted in the summer, and that looked at conspiracy beliefs in 7 different countries. And for example, in India, 72% of the people believed that coronavirus is actually a Chinese bioweapon. That's a huge amount of people. And in the US, for example, it was 32%, which is still every 3rd person that believes that kind of things. And when you look at narratives like that 5G, this new phone network standard, is responsible for the coronavirus. In Germany, you have 7% who believe that. But in Jordan, for example, it's also 1/3 of the population. And this is linked to following the measures less, like wearing no face mask or being not likely to get a vaccine, or also using violence. So it is linked to behavior in the pandemic, and it hinders us to manage the pandemic. And I think it's important to have a look at this on an early stage and have concepts how to deal with that, because these vaccine centers are likely to be attacked, not maybe physically, but that people go there and interrupt people in their work. And we need concepts how to deal with that and how to prepare the employees there.
We've just entered the 2nd year of the pandemic. Will we see even worse protests? Will conspiracy theories thrive even more?
I think it also depends on how the government reacts. So if a certain kind of protests are not allowed, then they won't happen. But they look, of course, for other ways, like giving flyers and stuff like that. So they try to react to the restrictions that they have. But of course, the demonstration has another powerful impact. You see the pictures, they look very motivating for the scene. So it depends on directions of the government, but I think especially the topic of vaccination was always, since vaccinations were invented, part of conspiracy theories. And therefore that's crucial to really sit down and have strategies how to deal with that worldwide, not only in Germany, because there will be probably attacks. And there were already attacks against scientific institutions also in Germany.
Very worrying outlook there. Pia Lamberti, psychologist and expert on conspiracy theories. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Bye.
Right, time for your questions now. Over to our science correspondent, Derek Williams.
Why do children have so few symptoms of COVID-19 and have fewer side effects?
One of the things that's puzzled researchers since the beginning of the pandemic has been the effect that the disease has on kids. They just don't seem to get it as often as adults do. And when they do, it only rarely turns severe. Why not? Well, experts now think that various factors could be playing roles. The first involves differences in immune response in children and adults. That hypothesis focuses on the emergency system that responds to an exposure fast, called the innate immune system. Its proponents say that because the innate response is still largely untrained in young children, it might often react more powerfully and quickly to infection with SARS-CoV-2 than it would in an adult, wiping out the virus before it has time to gain a foothold. Another train of thought says that what's called a cross-reactivity might be playing a role. Anyone who has kids is familiar with the seemingly never-ending series of sniffles that they bring home from daycare and from school. By some estimates, they have cold symptoms 3 to 4 times more often than adults do on average. That means that a child's bloodstream is this kind of seething, boiling cauldron of antibodies against the coronaviruses that cause common colds. And the theory is that some of those antibodies might also have a cross-reactive protective effect, that they might also be able to latch onto and disable SARS-CoV-2. There are more explanations out there for why kids have fewer symptoms with COVID-19, but those two are the most common.